Hare Krishna, Namaste.
Chapter 13 is entitled as Kshetra, Kshetrajna Yoga, also as Prakriti Purusha Vibhaga Yoga, also as Prakriti Purusha Viveka Yoga.
Sloka 5, Part 5. ṛṣibhir bahudhā gītaṁ, chandobhir vividhaiḥ pṛthak, brahma-sūtra-padaiś caiva, hetumadbhir viniścitaiḥ. That knowledge of the field of activities and of the knower of activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in Vedānta-sūtra with all reasoning as to cause and effect. We have been studying how the great sages, the Vedas, and in Brahma-sūtra, the dualities have been brought forward clearly. The dualities, namely Jivatma and Prakriti, their existence and differences, Jivatma and Paramatma, their existence and differences, Paramatma and Prakriti, their existence and differences. In part 1 of the sloka, we saw references given by great rishis like Parasara Muni and Vedavyasa on this topic. And then in part 2 we saw some references from Vedas, Upanishads. And in part 3 we saw a short introduction to Brahma-sūtra. And in part 4, that is the previous session, we covered the Kshetra part, the field of activities, that is the body, its existence and origin. The material nature or created and has its origin as Supreme Lord. This was confirmed by the sutra Astitu, that ether has its origin. Likewise, all the other elements also has theirs. Then the question raised by the Purva Pakshi, the opponent, if the material nature is created, then the living entities must also be created or being created. We saw from the sutra Nātma sute nityatvacha tabhyaha, that the Atmas are not created, they are eternal. They never die when the body dies and never born when the body is born. Then the question arises, maybe they get destroyed and created during the creation and annihilation of this material universe. The answer we saw from the Upanishad and Gita, that they never get created even at the time of creation of the universe and get destroyed at the time of destruction of the universe. They eternally exist. Then we had a question, that is Atma a knower? And we saw from the sutra Jñāto eva, the living entity or the knower. Then the next question arises, who is the doer? We learned from the sutra Karta Shastrarthavat, that it is the living entity who is the doer. Otherwise, the Shastras, the scriptures, would be of no value. Then there came another question. If Atma, the living entities, are the doer, is he an independent doer or a dependent doer, dependent on someone else? If we agree that he is an independent doer, the opponent is going to say, then what is the purpose of Paramatma? What is the purpose of God? He is just there but has no power. And if we say yes, then there are a series of questions will be raised that we will see today. So let's first understand that Atmas are dependent. How do we know? In Brahma-sūtra, it is said, Parātu Tachrutehe, meaning Jivatma are the doer, performs activities, but those activities indeed controlled by Paramatma, which means the living entities are not independent, they are completely dependent on Paramatma. This is what we have covered so far. Now comes list of questions. If it is the Lord who controls the living entities, then all of us are just like puppets in the hands of the Lord. If we accept that Paramatma controls the Jivatma, then the doubts arises are, number one, why do we have Vedas? Because the Jivatma cannot act independently. If he cannot act independently, the Vedas are instructing to Jivatma, but Jivatma doesn't have an ability to decide and act independently. Therefore, why even Vedas commands and instructs to the Jivatma? It is of no use. Ultimately, it is Paramatma who is making the decision. So, the instruction given in Vedas to Jivatma has no value, doesn't make any sense. That's number one. Number two, if it is Paramatma who controls Jivatma by seated in their heart, then the action that are performed by Jivatma, which in turn is going to return punya or papa, must not go to Jivatma, it has to go to Paramatma. Is that acceptable? Because we have learnt in Gita that Krishna said that he is not affected by papa or punya. But if he is the one who is directing the Jivatma in certain activities, then why Jivatma has to take the responsibility of papa and punya karma? That's number two. Number three, if it is Paramatma who makes the living entity to do bad activities, bad things, and they get the bad reaction and suffer for that, then Paramatma seem to be having no compassion to the living entity. Number four, if it is Paramatma who is a controller of the living entities, that means me doing good activities, helping someone, giving charity, taking up the process of bhakti, being obedient to spiritual master, serving others, all these things are dictated and controlled by Paramatma. All my good activities. He is the one who makes me to do good activities. Likewise, me going and hitting someone, being mean to others, cheating others, being disobedient to the authorities, all these things are also directed by Paramatma, and the result comes out of it are sorrows. That means he is just randomly picking up people and deciding you be a good person and you be a bad person. Why does he act in such a biased manner? Why does he have to show favoritism to some people and treat someone else differently? That's number 4. Number 5. If it is Paramatma who controls everyone, then there is no scope for me to independently have any thoughts, thinking. If I have to change something in my life, then I don't have that ability, because all those are controlled by Paramatma. There is no scope for myself to make changes. It is He who dictates and decides my path, not me. For all these questions, there is one sutra given by Vedavyasa in Brahma-sūtra. He says, Krita-prayatna-pekshatu, that is, the Paramatma, who is the Antaryami, who resides within everyone, who controls everyone, waits for the Jivatma to make the first effort in each and every activity. Once the Jivatma makes the first effort, then the Lord who is seated in the heart as Paramatma promotes the activity by providing his permission. It is based on the previous karmas, Papa karma and Punya karma. One gets a body, and along with the body comes the impression, the vasanas, which drives the Jivatma who's associated with the body to do certain activities. The activities that it may desire for, like, and there are activities which it may dislike, hate to perform. So these things are the first step, initial effort that Jivatma takes. I want that. I don't want this. So these desire and hatred are carried over from previous lives, and the Atma, Jivatma, make an initial effort to either attain the desired ones, desired objects, or to avoid those objects it hates. Therefore, it is the Jivatma who makes the initial effort. Once the Jivatma makes an initial effort, that is, it decides what it wants as its goal, then Paramatma, who is the Antaryami, seated, resides within everyone's heart and controls, approves that activity. So here is what we need to know, that the Antaryami, the Lord who is situated inside the heart of all the living entities, initially he takes a role as indifferent, called udasina. He simply watches. He doesn't take any action from himself, either to control or dictate, nothing. The Lord watches, shows no difference, udasina, indifferent. This is the beginning stage where Jivatma makes a decision to attain something, for example, at that point the Lord is udasina. Next, once the first effort is made, decision is being made, what the Jivatma wants to do, the next stage that Paramatma takes, role that the Paramatma takes is Anumanta, permitter. That is, irrespective of whether the act is good or bad, the Lord permits the activity. That means, if He doesn't permit, then no activity is possible in this world. If one says that Lord should only permit good activity, then who's going to permit the bad activities? That means God doesn't have power to permit, or anyone can do bad activities without Lord's permission. So that's not the case. Whether it is a bad action or good action, the Lord has to give permission. Anumanta is a permitter. Now with these understanding, let's go through our questions that we saw earlier. The first question: if the Jivatma cannot act independently, then why do Vedas preaches or instruct Jivatma to do certain things? The answer that we saw: Jivatma has independence to decide and make the first effort on his own. No one is interfering in the decision-making part. This is what we often hear as free will. So the free will has been given for the Jivatma to make the initial effort. Therefore, the Vedas giving instruction to Jivatma is perfectly right. The Jivatma can make a right choice and decisions to do certain things and to avoid certain things. Therefore, the answer for the first question is Vedas are valid because it's instructing to Jivatma, the living entity, who has the ability to make the initial effort, who has the free will to make choices. The second question was, if Paramatma controls the Jivatma, then the actions that are performed by Jivatma, which gives reaction, should not go to the Jivatma, because everything is directed by Paramatma. They are not entitled for Papa and Punya. Probably those Papa and Punya must go to Paramatma, not to Jivatma. The Lord takes a position as permitter doesn't mean that He has to take the ownership or responsibility of the individual person's decision. The living entities take the first effort, and that effort has been permitted by the Supreme Lord, the Paramatma. Let's see an example. Say that there is a property which is common to two parties. If one party decides to give a part of that property as a gift to someone, say the king, and it takes the permission of the other owner, and when the gift is given to the king in return, who is pleased, gives many gifts to this person who donated his land. Here, the return gifts are bestowed to the owner who made the decision to give the donation. Therefore, that person who made the decision is the enjoyer to receive those gifts, not the owner who gave the permission. Similarly, since it is Jivatma who makes the decision, who makes the first effort to perform certain activities, whether the activities is punya or papa, whatever the outcome is going to be, that is going to go to this person who made the decision, the choice, using his free will. Therefore, telling that Paramatma has to take the ownership of the papa and punya is not right. Paramatma is just permitter in this case. The third question, it appears Paramatma has no compassion, karunya, because it appears that Paramatma is the one who makes people to do bad things. Therefore, they get bad reaction and suffer, which seems to be not compassionate nature of the Lord. But the answer for that is, when someone decides to make an effort to do sinful activity, Paramatma permitting that action itself a punishment to the Jivatma for making that effort to do sinful activity. So that's the answer for number 3. Number 4, Paramatma seems to be more biased in the way he is dealing with the living entities. Some people are pushed to do good activities and receive good reaction, whereas some people are pushed to do bad activities and receive bad reaction, and they have to suffer. Why does he does such things? It appears he has some favoritism to certain people and hatred towards others. The answer for this is, everyone has been given the free will. It is not that only those people whom he has favoritism has been given free will. The same free will is given to every living entities to exercise and make right decisions and do right activities. What Lord does is simply permit that to happen. Therefore, telling that Lord is biased is not a right statement. And the last question that was raised is, if Paramatma controls everyone, then I don't have a choice to even think, because even my thinking process is controlled by him. Therefore, I cannot make changes in my path. If I want to become a nice devotee, it's not my choice, it's Paramatma's choice. If I have decided to harm someone, talk bad about someone, that is not my choice, it is Paramatma's choice, because he is residing in my heart and controlling my thoughts. The answer to that is, Jivatma has independence, as we saw from the sutra, and it can make decisions on its own, and it has knowledge. It is made of knowledge and it possesses knowledge. Therefore, the knowledge which is given to Jivatma cannot go waste. Using this knowledge, given free will, it can take the first effort in a right path. When it does so, the Lord certainly permits those activities as well. Hence, we cannot blame Paramatma for each and everything that we do. It is us as living entities with a given free will and knowledge to make right choice based on the instructions given by Vedas. Let's take another few more minutes to complete one last item in the same topic. We learned that Krishna takes two roles. One is udhāsīna, that is, when a Jivatma is making the first effort, the Lord takes a role as udhāsīna, indifferent. And then next, he takes a role as Anumanta, a permitter, sanctioning that decision of the living entity. There is an exception where the Lord also takes the third role, prayojaka or dyutaka, which means with some special Jivatma, he does not take either the indifferent or just as a permitter, but he goes beyond those roles to make the Jivatma to perform certain deeds. In the Upanishad, it is said, Yesha eva sadhu karma karyate tamyam yebaha lokebhyaha unninishati. Yesha eva asadu karma karyate tamyam adho ninishati. Meaning that when Paramatma wishes to uplift someone, he makes them perform good deeds. When Paramatma wishes to cast down someone, he makes them to perform sinful deeds. We should understand this is exceptional case. This is not a common principle that the Lord takes for all the living entities. Krishna also says, same in Bhagavad Gita, when someone has enormous bhakti towards him, he makes sure that that person reaches him by performing good deeds. Whereas in other hands, if someone hates him, he makes sure that that person performs bad, worse deeds so that they can go further down into sinful path. That too, to correct them. That's the idea behind it. Therefore, this role, the third role, besides udhāsīna, anumanta, which is prayojaka, is not towards everyone, but towards a very few selected people. Selected good people or selected bad people. This role does not apply for common people like us. The next two verses covers the answer for the question raised in the first half of the fourth sloka. We will learn that in our next session. ṛṣibhir bahudhā gītaṁ chandobhir vividhaiḥ pṛthak brahma-sūtra-padaiś caiva hetumadbhir viniścitaiḥ. Namaste. Hare Krishna.